let's go ahead and get this meeting called to order. Chet, did you find out if we had anybody to do swearing in?
Please.
Okay, perfect. So we need to get that done first. For all of you that are new, that have not been sworn in, we have somebody here that can do us all real quick before we get going, so that we can go ahead and vote on official matters.
Point of order, Vanessa, I think the whole board should probably be sworn in at the same time.
Sounds
to go
great.
through the formality.
Perfect. Okay. So if you want to go ahead and come on up, please.
Okay,
Thank
so is Richard here?
Yes.
Okay. Vanessa?
Right here. Thank you.
Stephanie? Mike? Okay.
I need to swear in this one.
I don't have one for you, so that
Okay.
means you haven't been reappointed yet.
I was reappointed as a district.
Okay.
It was very much a late thing.
Then that means the mayor's office has not made your certificate.
Okay,
So-
can I swear in? So I got a certificate?
I'll have to mail you your oath and everything, but yes, you can. So, those meetings sworn in, I'll need you to please raise your right hand.
So you'll need to probably share. I'll probably have one for the first time.
Okay. You can repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Vanessa Jefferson,
Solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and faithfully discharge the duties
and faithfully discharge the duties
of the Animal Control Advisory Board
of the Animal Control Advisory Board
for the City of Wichita, Kansas, so help me God.
for the City of Wichita, Kansas, so help me God.
Okay, great. There's two papers that I'll need you to sign, the oath, and then there's the acceptance letter. So once you get those signed, I'll clean them up.
I need to have your information. Well, actually, no.
I'll give it to the mayor's office.
And I'll mail it out to you. Okay. And this will just sit over
And
it.
so just send those two
Does it
back.
just be notarized?
Yep, just I didn't send those two back to you.
Okay, thank you. I think that it was right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I did, and I also got you two pulled up if they comments. I can send those in.
Thank you.
Okay, so now that that's done, before we jump right into business, I wanted to take a moment for everybody to introduce themselves. We do have some new board members, and that's really exciting. So if you want to start at the very end, just give out your name, district.
I am Patrice Brooks. I was appointed by the mayor. I am the sole veterinarian on the board.
Thank you.
I'm Mike Marlette. I'm appointed by Cindy Placo, District 6.
Richard Booth, I was the mayor's appointee. I'm in District 3.
Patrick Atkins was appointed by Jeff Blueball, District 4.
Perfect. I'm Vanessa Christopherson. I'm District 3. Appointed by James Clendenin.
I'm Stephanie McCurdy, District 2, Becky Tuttle.
Elaine Stephen, District 5, Brian Clark.
I'm sorry, won't say your name again?
Elaine Stephen.
It's like this beat. We do have a new appointee for District 1, and unfortunately that attendee wasn't able to make it today, so next meeting hopefully we'll all get to meet. Last name is Hardwell.
How you spell
Hardwell, Hardwell. First name is spelled Taiwana, T-I apostrophe J-U-A-N-A.
And that was District.
District 1. right, so first thing on the agenda is the approval of the January minutes. Now, the situation with the minutes, I do understand that they're not posted online. We have not had anybody taking our minutes like we were supposed to, so we've had some conflict on getting those posted, but we do have January's that will be on the website before too long, so I do apologize for that. We are trying to get compliant with what needs to take place. Unfortunately, some things were out of our control, so we are working on fixing that, and today we do have somebody here taking notes. So it's an excellent start, and we really appreciate you coming to do that for us. Okay. So under staff reports, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Lieutenant and Captain.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here, especially under the circumstances. We had canceled the meeting in April. Frankly, had we not, we probably would have canceled this one, but it just seems like we really need to have a meeting to get going, so we decided to go ahead and go forward. So I appreciate for all those that are monitoring us on Facebook and YouTube. I want to say thank you very much, for understanding the difficult circumstances of holding the meeting. We have a new lieutenant. As we told you, Lieutenant Sigmund was going to be.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Okay, so they're saying that they're not able to see what's happening. Is there something with the camera?
The camera angle should show me standing right here. I've already verified that.
Okay, all right.
I'm watching it
Are you?
in real
Okay.
time.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, I
So
apologize.
yeah, maybe they're delayed. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. We have a new lieutenant. Lieutenant Sigmund retired in June. Lieutenant Santiago Hungria has taken over and has been at the shelter for a short time. I'm going to ask him to come up here and introduce himself, but I will be the one giving the report today. So I'm going to ask him to step up here and introduce himself.
Good afternoon. My name is Santiago Hungria. I'm the lieutenant running the day-to-day operations at the animal shelter now. I've been with the Wichita Police Department for about 25 years. I've worked overnights. I've worked in SCAT, Special Community Action Team. I was a beat coordinator. Worked undercover narcotics. I used to have hair when I was with Captain Pinkston. I've been a sergeant. I was a sergeant for 15 years, and over the last year, I got promoted to a lieutenant. And I was asked to take over the day-to-day operations of the animal shelter. Pretty excited about the opportunity. I know there's a lot of challenges, and I look forward to working with everybody here on the board. See if we can keep improving. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I know we've got a lot of material to cover. I'm going to try to go over this fairly quick. If any of the board members have questions, let me know. Board chair, if you see anything that comes up online or via email, if you'll let me know, we can respond to those questions. The January summer for total reclaims total was 116, which is a 20% reclaim rate. February is 135 at 22%. March was 161 reclaims, which was 29%. April was 104, which is 31%. May was 118, which is 23%, and then June was 137 with 19%. Transfers, 399 for January, which is 70%. 419 for February, which is 68%. 348 for March, which is 62%. 169 for April, which is 50%. 313 for May, which is 62%. 518 for June, which is 71%. Total euthanasia for January was 51, which is 9%. February was 63 for 10%. March was 54, which is 10%. April was 62, which is 19%. May was 72, which is 14%. And June was 74, which is 10%. The dog and puppy totals, if anybody needs those, are on here. Does anybody on the board think that I need to cover those? Okay. If you look at your second sheet, the dog bites by district and dog attacks by district. District 1 for dog bites by district. District 1 had 7 in January, 18 in February, 15 in March, 10 in April, 17 in May, and 15 in June. District 2 had 3 in January, 1 in February, 5 in March, 6 in April, 7 in May, 5 in June. District 3, we had 9 in January, 7 in February, 9 in March, 8 in April, 13 in May, and 19 in June. District 4, 6 in January, 7 in February, 8 in March, 2 in April, 9 in May, and 14 in June. District 5, we had 6 in January, 2 in February, 3 in March, 5 in April, 9 in May, and 10 in June. In District 6, we had 3 in January, 7 in February, 5 in March, 10 in April, 12 in May, and 9 in June. Dog attacks. District 1, January was 1, February was 6, March was 3, April was 4, May was 6, June was 2. District 2 had 0 for January, 6 in February, 1 in March, 5 in April, 6 in May, 1 in June. District 3 had 9 in January, 6 in February, 6 in March, 3 in April, 4 in May, and 28 in June. District 4 had 7 in January, 8 in February, 8 in March, 11 in April, 3 in May, and 14 in June. District 5, we had 4 in January, 7 in February, 2 in March, 6 in April, 1 in May, and 10 in June. And District 6, we had 12 in January, 10 in February, 8 in March, 14 in April, 3 in May, and 13 in June. Potentially dangerous dogs. District 1, we had 3 in January, 4 in February, 2 in March, 0 in April, 2 in May, 2 in June. District 2, we had 1 in January, we had none in February, March, and April, 4 in May, and none in June. For District 3, we had none in January or February, we had 3 in March, 1 in April, 1 in May, 1 in June. District 4, we had 2 in January, 3 in February, 1 in March, 3 in April, none in May, and 3 in June. District 5, we had none in January or February, 2 in March, 1 in April, 1 in May, 4 in June. District 6, we had 2 in January, 5 in February, 3 in March, 5 in April, 1 in May, and 2 in June. For dogs deemed dangerous by district, we had 1 in January for District 1. We'll go with District 1 first. 1 in January, 5 in February, 1 in March, 3 in April, 9 in May, 3 in June. For District 2, we had none in January or February, 2 in March, 3 in April, 1 in May, and none in June. For District 3, we had 5 in January, 1 in February, none in March, 2 in April, 5 in May, and 24 in June. For District 4, we had 3 in January, 1 in February, 6 in March, 5 in April, none in May, and 2 in June. For District 5, we had 3 in January, 2 in February, none in March, 3 in April, 2 in May, and none in June. For District 6, we had 10 in January, 5 in February, 7 in March, 3 in April, none in May, and 5 in June. If you look at the number of cat bites, we had a total of 8 for January, 15 for February, 11 for March, 10 for April, 8 for May, and 15 for June. If you look at other bites or exposures, we had 1 in January, 1 in February, 3 in March, 6 in April, 40 in May, and 8 in June. And then we have total bites, total attacks, and then a combined total attacks and bites at the end. If any one on the board have questions about that? Go ahead, Richard.
Just a question, the attacks, the number of attacks could be something like someone's being chased, and so that goes on record, but not bitten. So the bites are just where the teeth were actually causing a wound?
That is correct.
Okay.
Good distinction, but that's absolutely correct.
There's a question online, are stats kept for what youth rates would be without rescues taking animals?
We don't keep stats individually for rescue numbers or owner reclaims specifically. We just do it as a total number.
Would that be
Actually, there's a
possible?
reclaim percent that's listed.
The reclaim, someone could figure it out from the reclaim percent. But I don't know, when we do the euthanasia, we'd have to break that down. So we would know which ones of the euthanasia, how many were how many prior to the euthanasia number were rescued as opposed to owner reclaims.
So like in the month of January, there were 20% reclaimed and 70% transferred. So
Correct.
70% went to a rescue or somewhere else because the Wichita Animal Shelter no longer adopts out animals.
Well, that's correct. I guess technically that would be, because they all go through KHS for us, so I guess we could say that goes to the rescue.
I would say the one thing that I think they used to do that wasn't done is breaking it down between dogs, cats, and other species as far as we have as reclaimed, but I don't think we have as euthanized. Because I know, unfortunately, cats tend to have a much poorer situation and outcome in our shelter than dogs do.
They have the number of cat bites listed. It's
No,
on-
reclaimed.
Oh, reclaimed, okay, I see what you're saying.
Is the euthanasia rate listed out by species?
We do actually keep a separate list of species.
Okay, because
for euthanasia.
I don't have my copy of those yet, so, they can email me one or
Let
something.
me get you a copy.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed those on the way in.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
There is like
And I don't know if we always cover the reasons for euthanasia, but it is part of the report that we provided, so we'll go over them today. If you look at canines, our reasons for euthanasia, for the first 6 months, medical total would be 40. Aggressiveness would be 1. The testing would be 36. A dangerous dog designation would be 54. And dead on arrival would be 9. If you look at the cats, medical's 111. Feral is 5. The testing is 27. The age is 27. And died in care would be 1. If you look at other, medical is 43, testing is 18, dead on arrival would be 2, died in care would be 0, and age would be 2. Do I have any questions from the board?
On your others on testing, because I'm assuming that's rabies testing, are you including skunks and bats in that, wildlife, or just domestic animals?
Just domestic.
Do you have heard any non-domestic animals that you're processing through here for that?
Well, surprisingly, yes, more than I would have thought. It's not a significant percentage, but there are times we've taken 40 or 50 birds. There have been times when we've had horses, cattle. We had a very large pig 2 years ago. Those don't typically reside at the shelter, but they do sometimes come through the shelter. So those numbers would include those. We specifically delineate between the canines and the felines.
Thank you. Any other questions for Captain?
Just a question. In the January meeting, you said that the 2019 statistics, overall, there was an 11% euthanasia rate. Does that sound right? Because we're at 11% here so far. So I'm just wondering if our numbers didn't get crossed or.
I don't recall saying that at the last meeting, Richard. Typically, the cat rate is a little bit higher than that, so I'd be surprised if it's at 11. We're usually in the mid 14 to 15 range.
Okay.
For dogs, we're always under 10%, but cats we're definitely higher. So if it was 11%, it would probably be a coincidence, and it's usually a little bit higher than that.
Okay.
So I have, it's a little bit more of a statement than a question because it's going to address what we're talking about. And if I'm shouting, it's for the mask. So we had a total of 122 dogs deemed dangerous. Only 54 of those dogs were euthanized, which means 78 of those dogs were reclaimed. And when they're deemed dangerous, they have to have signage, special housing, microchip, and muzzled and not allowed in public, correct?
Yes,
And special insurance, which is really pricey.
correct.
Okay.
And they pay an annual fee for the registration.
Does that include PDD or just?
No, that's just dangerous
Just
dogs.
dangerous.
I'm just making sure. Okay.
I say that because we only had, because that's like a 44% reclaim, actually a 64% reclaim rate on dangerous dogs where they have to do a lot more than put up a sign and put a microchip in it.
Right,
That's kind of where I was going with that point because it's appropriate for what we're going to talk about.
sure,
Hope that's okay.
yes.
George, do you have a question?
Yes, since three of us are from District 3, yourself, Richard, and myself, you, Vanessa, June, something happened in June. I mean, 28, 3, 9, 6, and the rest of them for number of dog attacks by district, and then 24, you can see, there's only one other double digit, these dog. What happened in June in District 3?
Did you guys all let your dogs outside?
Yeah, and the numbers are lower, for all of these,
Right.
for these first 6 months than they were probably last year, 6
Right.
months. Is that because of COVID and people aren't out so much, so that's why the numbers are down, would you say? Yes?
That would be my assumption, George. If you look at the timeframe, June is when we really got away from the restrictions. More people were interacting, probably more people had their animals out, and we just had more opportunity for these type of events to occur.
I know I've walked my dog almost every day for 20 years in my neighborhood, and I like seeing all sorts of people. It's good
It
that
is.
all sorts of people are walking their dogs, which also means that there's more chance for dogs that got loose on a regular basis to go after a dog walking down the street that may have never been there before.
Right.
With their
That's what I'm attributing it to as well.
or as we were circled by a horse. It was a very friendly horse. Thank God my dogs were too.
I think the horse is bigger than the dogs, so probably
Yes,
no
but-
choice.
The dogs loved it to the horse, not a good thing.
Oh,
I
okay.
promise.
Any more questions for Captain?
Does anything come up on the line for questions?
Let's see. Can they start, this is from Donna Worth asking, can they start tracking the number of dogs taken that would otherwise be on the euthanasia list? Many are on the euthanasia list at the time of being taken.
That would be helpful information.
Yeah.
I guess I agree because I don't understand what we're trying to track there. That doesn't tell me what I'm tracking.
The number of animals that would be euthanized if it weren't for the rescues intervening were.
So basically, that would be any dog that Kansas Humane Society turned away. Or any dog or cat, because you guys don't adopt out. So the Kansas Humane Society comes out and chooses what they consider adoptable dogs and cats
Mhm.
and transfers them if they have room to their shelter. And the remaining from that number, so not going to the Kansas Humane Society, the remaining number would be the numbers that other rescues such as Wall and Lap and Beauties and Karma and
Right, there was a time when the rescues would typically come here and give us their numbers. So I would rely on the rescues for that number as opposed to us trying to track another thing.
And I think, and that's a little bit tough too, because some of those would have come from the shelter and some of them wouldn't.
Sure.
So basically, if an animal comes into the Wichita Animal Shelter and Kansas Humane Society deems they don't want it and they are not going to transport it, all of those are in theory on a euthanasia list. I think that's what they're getting at.
Right.
Rescues should know exactly where their animals come from.
Yes, they should.
I mean, I know we do, but.
I know, but like at the beginning of the year, we got numbers from all the rescues, but those numbers didn't say they necessarily came from the animal shelter or an owner relinquished or.
So are they mandated as part of their legal right to operate as a rescue? Are they mandated to report those numbers to the public?
Actually, I don't think they're required to.
We're not.
I think they just do it because they want to do it. They want people to know, the service they provide. The rescues are really pretty important to us as a shelter. So they just typically do that as a service to provide those numbers. I don't think they're required to. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to do that. Okay, so on new business, item number 1. I received an email correspondence from a member in the community wanting to put this on the agenda to have it be discussed. And the issue that came up was they were wanting to talk about reinstating the animal control board meetings to monthly as opposed to quarterly. The reason why quarterly, bylaws originally stated that it was supposed to be monthly. I couldn't find the amended version, but at the time I couldn't find it. I did now. The ordinance number is under 49-954, and it's section 6.02.040, and that is where the bylaws were basically amended to where the board shall meet at least quarterly and conduct meetings. So if you want to look at that ordinance, that's there. What I'd like to bring up for comment or maybe a motion is there interest in the board to move our meetings from quarterly to monthly?
I would like to make a motion that we meet in the center and meet every other month.
Okay,
I would second that.
every other month.
Meeting where?
Yeah, what is the
Meet
center?
every other month, instead of meeting monthly
Well, I
or
understand that,
quarterly.
but you said the center. What is the center?
Meet in the middle.
Like the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I think we're gonna have a physical.
No, no.
So to give those some background of why we went from monthly to quarterly, it was because we have working committees. And that allowed the committees to meet, gain structure, do research, and bring something that was worth educating our members about. And so we went to the quarterly meetings. And then in the event that there was something that needed to be discussed, such as TNR, we held a special meeting. And then last year, we had 3 extra meetings to discuss those items. So just because we're meeting quarterly per bylaw doesn't mean that we can't, if we have something completely pressing, we can't do a special meeting like we did last year. We had, 7 meetings last year. So we met, during that time anyway. So it's, if we have something pressing, we can always meet.
What kind of input does the board have? Other inputs? Is it interest? Do we want to keep it at quarterly? Maybe Ellen's motion and what she said.
I personally
Richard?
like the idea of meeting every other month.
Okay.
I think that if you're doing a lot of reading and research on an idea, it's easy for that to get stale or misplaced in the course of 3 months.
Yeah, I agree.
And some of the urgency maybe is dissipated.
And that would give us a predictable schedule, so instead of special meetings, so that, because with a special meeting, then you have to notify everybody, well, we've got a meeting and everything. But if it is designated every other month, then, because one of the pieces of feedback we've heard a lot of is, well, I didn't know you were having a meeting and I haven't had a chance to get feedback. So that would
It would be
facilitate.
like every odd month or every even month,
Yeah.
instead of like, what is the third month? What is the third Sunday?
Yeah, something easy like that, odd or even.
Okay, Richard?
And is it, so in the event that there was a subcommittee,
Mhm.
if, could it be required that, maybe they can't get everything together in a 2-month period? Could they then say, okay, we'll do that quarterly, we'll report quarterly for that subcommittee?
I don't see why that wouldn't be an option. Definitely. I mean,
And a lot of times subcommittees can kind of be a little bit more variable, so if it's something really urgent, they might meet once a week. Or if it's something that's got some prolonged research, they might meet once a month or every 2 weeks or those type of things. And then usually when we have subcommittees, they would have a chance to speak. But sometimes it was just like, we're discussing this,
like a brief report
And-
of what's
and, yeah.
going on.
and then sometimes it would be like a detail of like when they presented the whole dangerous dog new law type of thing.
Okay.
So as a new member, current standing committees and subcommittees, where would I find a list of those?
We currently don't have any right now, so, yeah. We currently don't have any at the moment, because we're not currently working on anything right now, so. So the motion on the floor, brought up by Dawn, was to move our meetings to every other month. Teresa seconded that. Is there more discussion on this, maybe, before we vote on this? Do we want to do you were talking about even odds, or?
Well, if we keep it as is, that would give us December off, which would be preferable for me.
Keep it as is, as in what, quarterly?
Oh,
Or,
we
I'm
meet
sorry,
July.
months?
We meet in October? No, I'm sorry, it would place us over the.
No, with September and then.
Yeah,
If we
September
set
and then-
this today, it would be odd months, which would make us kind of skip out around that holiday
November
season
and
when it's hard for
January.
people to get here anyway.
Yeah, so that would, odd months would be good.
Okay.
And we might be odd anyway, probably.
Well, most of us have requirement.
Okay. Is there any other discussion before we vote on this? Okay, so all in favor of moving our meetings to every other month, being odd months? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion does pass, so we'll go ahead and get that taken care of. So with that, we'll have to amend our bylaws, correct?
Yeah,
To
so
reflect.
the city of Wichita would have to ratify that. So they will have to amend the bylaws for this committee to reflect that.
Okay, so we'll make a note.
And just to quantify, this is the, what Wednesday of the month? Is it the third?
Third.
Third.
Okay, so it would be the third Wednesday every other month, so then the odd months.
Correct.
Just because if it's in their minutes that way, then it's easy for people to figure that out.
So that would make our next meeting September, correct? Okay. Just writing some notes here.
I don't think that would actually require us to change the bylaws in the city. It just says at least quarterly. More than
So how-
quarterly. I said more than quarterly is fine. I don't think we need to change the bylaws for the board if we were reading more than
I'm gonna check with the city and make sure, just be on the safe side.
that. Yeah.
That's why we have legal. Yay.
I know, that's awesome. Okay. So another thing that was brought up from members of the community was moving questions and comments from the audience to the beginning of meetings as opposed to the end of meetings. It was brought up that there wasn't enough time towards the end of the meetings to address everybody's questions and comments, so they wanted to move to the very beginning instead of the end. I don't know if this is something that you guys want to do. I kind of want to open the floor for discussion, and if we think that's good, then we can make a motion on it, but just kind of addressing things that were brought up.
How does city council do theirs?
City council, I think they have their comments like after the person makes their presentation, correct, George?
Well, usually it's at the beginning. There may be some presentation for someone retiring or something, but it's at the beginning. The end, the county does too. County gives you 3, city gives you 5 minutes at the beginning.
So then would there be no comment after everything that we discussed?
Correct.
And I think that we could, if we chose, like we were discussing a topic, I think that we as a board could choose to open it back up to questions. But I like the comments before, because sometimes if we're gonna discuss something and vote on it, that may make us decide whether we want to table it to maybe do some more research, but we also have the input on the people. And then we always have the opportunity to open up for more. I think that may kind of go along with our next one, relocation of board meetings, because the other thing we can't have is if we're here and we have questions for 2.5 hours, then we get nothing done. We still have to be able to get things done.
The other thing that having questions at the beginning would help with is structure during meetings, so that it's not as much a kind of back and forth, hard to follow the agenda, And like Teresa said, that way we'd be able to have the input before we're, I like that.
I do see some pros and cons here. Pros, of course, being able to address things ahead of time, like what you're saying. Cons that I'm a little bit concerned about is if there is something that comes up during the meeting, they're not gonna have the opportunity to bring it up. And that worries me as well, because we do want them to be able to voice whatever concerns they may have. I kind of think the whole time constraint might actually go down if we're gonna be meeting more frequently. So I think that would work itself out.
Actually, that was one of the problems with the monthly meeting, because we would like literally have an hour and a half of questions. And some of it wasn't questions, but it was more bullying and people saying the same thing over and over again.
Right.
Well, and maybe one, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was
Richard, go
just
ahead.
gonna say that this is concerning issues that the public are bringing up that are not on the agenda or anything, just like they do in City Hall, right?
Mhm.
So they would still have an opportunity to address issues that the board is discussing, right, in the typical fashion. So the board starts discussing something before we make a vote, we put it out to the public.
Right, we open the floor for discussion. Normally towards the end of the meeting is when, a lot of people would bring up their concerns. Either way, I would go for both. It doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that there's enough time for them to address what they need to get out there and let us know about. So,
Are they given a time constraint?
yes, it's always been 5 minutes. We set the timer for it.
And one thing that might help with the amount of comments and dialogue during the meeting is more of an ongoing communication with Wichita. I mean, as members of this advisory board, I'm not sitting here representing myself.
Right.
And I'm not just representing Councilmember Fry. I represent District 5. And so it is my responsibility to have an ongoing conversation with all of the stakeholders and as many people in District 5 as I can. And I think to have that kind of open door communication can help alleviate some of the need to communicate that during meeting time.
So I guess if we want to make these changes, there needs to be a motion presented on the floor and seconded to have the format changed.
Can I ask just 2 questions? So if we chose to say we want the people to speak before, we would still have the ability to open up discussion later if we so felt it needed, or table up, or if we felt there was a whole bunch of discussion on something we were discussing, we could table the vote on that to allow those people to come back the next meeting and speak at the beginning, correct?
But aren't these off-item agendas, so we're not gonna be, it's not gonna be something on our agenda that we're discussing that might be influenced by necessarily, right?
Right.
I mean, everything that we vote on or discuss, we always open the floor for discussion for the community, so they're able to express concerns based off of what we're talking about before we vote. But this, I think, would allow the opportunity for them to present their concerns ahead of time, that, like Richard said, are not on the agenda, so that we're made aware.
The other thing about having it in the beginning, I know like at city council meetings, they have a brief period of time, and they know it's always gonna be like after the prayer and after like, the mayor proclaiming a particular, this is the day of. And so they kind of know where it's gonna be, so they can arrange time off from work and say, I can go, and within this time period, I can say what I need to say, and then they can go, if they need to go, so. That's why I like the beginning of the meeting.
Does the board specify a maximum? I mean, if you have 20 people show up and they each want 5 minutes,
I think ours is 3.
Yeah, I think we did 3 minutes.
Ours is 3.
I was thinking
okay,
we
well,
had
if 20
5.
people show up,
Yeah,
Right, no, I
apologize.
understand.
it's still an hour, so is there a limit to the maximum number that will be allowed to address the board at the beginning of the meeting, or?
We've not put limits on it.
That would be pretty cool if we had 20 people.
Sometimes
Well,
we
yeah.
have quite a bit. We have.
And I will tell you that I went to I don't know what the official name of the meeting was, but we were having some development changes in our neighborhood. And there was somebody else that was concerned about what was going on in their neighborhood, and we literally had 150 people in there. And they actually made a statement because the one people, they kept saying the same thing over and over again. So they kind of told them, okay, if you've got something else to say, then let us know.
Well, that's my concern. I mean, I received about 18 emails, 15 of which probably said the same thing.
Yes.
I don't want to sit here and entertain the same thing 20 times.
I think that the one thing that we've done in the past is if someone speaks and is saying the exact same thing with you, we ask you to yield back to that person that is speaking. Except for George, he isn't following rules.
Right, George is an exception.
Yes,
But I
George.
just asked a question, and Stephanie's right, because she always kept the time watch on me on 3 minutes, so
And
she's
you
right
have
about
to.
that. So what I'd like to see, maybe, the county does 3, city does 5, why don't we be different and do 4?
We
Right in the
would-
middle.
We would be here until the next day.
Well, that's 20 people sign up, but
Right.
we've never had 20 people sign up yet.
That's not true. I can tell you more.
Thank you for your comments, George, and your suggestion. So, question is this something that we want to make a motion on to change, or do we want to keep things as they are?
I think we need to vote on it, so I'm gonna make a motion that we move the minutes the discussion from the public to the beginning of the meeting and limit them to 3 minutes.
I would second that.
It's been moved and second that we go ahead and move public comments to the beginning of our meeting with a time limit of 3 minutes per presentation for members of the community. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and pass this motion. Public comment will be at the beginning of our meetings. Next line item on new business was also brought to the board that there is a recommendation to move our board meetings to a different location. Let me pull this up here real quick, sorry. I believe is it the George Transportation, is that right?
Yeah, Transportation Center.
Transportation Center is where it was brought up to move our board meetings to. So I said I would bring it to the board for discussion.
The big advantage of moving our meeting there, we love Mark's not even here to. Okay, so UMass. Graciously lets us use this facility, but they also have things sometimes after 5:30. And they have staff that would like to get out of here at a reasonable time, and I greatly appreciate that. And I think that was kind of one of the reasons, especially having the public input, then our meetings were kind of really rushed at that last bit so that we could try and get out at 5:30 for the Humane Society. So if we held our meetings there, we would have more availability of time in that regards.
Where's this located?
It's across from Entrust Bank Arena.
214 South Topeka.
It's at Waterman and Topeka, it's tucked back in.
700 East Waterman is the actual address.
Okay.
Thank you.
Garmin's not the best to get you there.
Mike Mann said we could have the building to 1:15. Just saying.
When we were meeting at the transit center, the very last thing, we were actually removed from that facility, from using their facility.
Why was that?
Because people were not following the parking rules.
Correct.
They were not
And it
following
will-
what?
They were not following
The parking is very limited there, and buses were coming in and out at 4, 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock. They couldn't get in and out. They were about to tow cars, and they asked us to move our meetings to another facility because they were unable to use their facility to continue the infrastructure of the city. And also, that room that we were in at that location is only probably a quarter of this room, even when they opened the walls up. So it limited the amount of people to be in that room. And right now, with social distancing, which will most likely be in place for quite a ways into our future, I'm not sure that that facility would be able to accommodate us in the event that we have a hot topic and so on and so forth. Because it does happen, and we had people standing in the back, we had people standing in the hall, we had people blocking the area to the administrative offices. And that was also the same, the last meeting we were there, whenever we had cars that were parked in front of the bus bays and people were not allowed to enter or exit.
Do you know what the room capacity is for that particular location?
There's 2 lock-offs that are there. There's one room and then another room, and we had, it's like an L-shaped room, so you can't see around the bends.
Oh, okay.
So I would imagine that, I mean, we were over capacity because we were moving people into the hall, and there were people even standing outside waiting to come in to speak during those meetings.
Okay.
Well, and one thing we'll need to keep in mind, and probably should address as another item, is that during this time, while we've got social distancing and everything, like today, we should probably make sure, like today's meeting, you know, they're able to type in comments on YouTube, but if we had just kind of a better channel for expressing some of the comments and questions, like the county has been doing it one way, where now they're having somebody come in a mask one at a time. Or the city does it like remote from Century 2, but just so that we have some way to be able to let people make their comments. And so, like you're saying, the space is going to be an issue probably for a while.
Absolutely.
But that, in addition to considering another form for comments.
Okay. Yes, George?
The old director is the one that moved us out. The new director, Mike Tan, he's highly in favor of us coming back there, and so is the city manager. The parking thing, we'll get a map out there to let the people know on where the agenda is, where they can park. That should be in that room there. I meet in the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board every month. We have it for 3 months, but it's every bit as big as this room when you've got the open. I'll guarantee it's within just a few square foot of each other, and we can find that out easily.
I sat in that room, and we had every media outlet in there, along with trying to put almost 200 people in there, and there were people in the hall and out. And I understand what you're saying, I do. We also sent out a map ahead of time of where people were to and not park, and they don't follow it anyway. And it made for a very rough couple of meetings with people. The transit gentleman was very unhappy. WPD was very unhappy with the park. I mean, it goes all the way up. I think is it the railroad that's right there too? They were parked all the way up there, and they literally had a traffic jam on Waterham of buses. It was very difficult. And they have rearranged that parking now to accommodate for Interest Bank Arena, and they still have the same scenario there. Yes, Mark?
If it makes any difference, I can commit to 6:30 for this facility. We close at 6:30, that's our hours. So I can also make the doors accessible, these doors accessible if people don't want to walk through our facility for any reason. Both of these doors don't set off a fire alarm for any reason. We can make doors directly accessible from without walking through the facility. I'm not advocating for having it here. Yes, I like it because it makes it easier for me to attend. I'm sure PD feels the same way. But I can make those concessions on, however often you need them to have this open until 6:30 without any problem.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any more
And
discussion?
I think this is slightly off topic, but your comment on having people in, if we did have those discussions beforehand, then people could kind of have a time frame of when they were going to come in. Because like I was talking about that one meeting, we sat for 3 hours and we were not seen.
So, is it possible that we defer on making a decision on this until the next meeting, and that we look and see if there is space that would be maybe better approved than the transportation center? It sounds like that might be a real headache for the size of the groups.
I'm not necessarily concerned about us, but I'm concerned about people being able to have access to where we are.
Yeah.
And if that is going to be an issue like the last time we were there, we don't want to put the transit authority out either, because they have people to get home on those days too.
Yeah, we don't want to have to move
Right.
again, so maybe we could look a little more at that.
Okay,
So
so
I hear
what
that you're
we,
making a motion to table
you can
it?
make an emotion
So
to
I'd like
table
to
it.
make a motion then to table this issue. And it's been seconded.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we table this motion upon further research for the transit facility. All in favor? Oh, before we vote, there was a comment on the live feed here. Since they can't hear us very well or see who's voting, they would like for us to raise our hand. So if we can accommodate that, that would be helpful for the public. So all in favor of tabling the motion of relocating our board meeting, raise your hand. Okay, all opposed, none, motion passes, okay?
Captain Kingston, do you think it would you be able to provide maybe a list of other choices if we needed it for the next meeting?
Yeah, I'll see if we can come up with some alternate locations that would meet the needs of the board.
Okay, wonderful, thank you very much.
That way we have options.
That would be great. Excellent. Okay, so the next line item is number 4. I'm going to turn this over to George. He is going to give a presentation in regards to the new gold standard pilot program.
Well, I just wanted to say real quickly, 6:30 here would probably cure a lot of things, I'm just gonna say. So,
Okay.
thank you, Mark.
George, if you want to stand up here and look into the camera so the viewers may be able to see you, hear you a little bit better.
Now, first off, I want to tell you, don't anyone go out of the room, because this isn't going to be a presentation for 20-plus minutes, so it's going to be quick. Many Wichitans have had their peace and tranquility disrupted by their neighbor's dog constantly barking. Relief is needed, and a new pilot program rolled out by Captain Pinkston and myself hopefully helps ease the tension between neighbors and gets this ongoing problem resolved. Currently, the affected neighbor has to jump through all kinds of hoops to get this problem resolved. Pictures, videos, audio, and day and time logs. The pilot program will have Sergeant Mitchell, was Captain Pinkston, but he has enough on his plate running Patrol East, and now he's moved to something else. He will assign, Sergeant Mitchell will assign the offending dog barker to the CPO, the community police officer assigned to that beat. And that officer's body camera, his Axon camera, will then be used as the gold standard in the court system when and if some resolve can't be gained through conversation and other helpful ideas. That's it, no one left, so we're good.
Thank you.
Don't run away, George.
We're gonna have questions.
We're
Oh,
gonna have questions.
no questions.
That's part of the presentation, George.
All right.
So one of the problems I see with that, with a person who really doesn't like dog barking despite having their multiple dogs. The problem is, if somebody comes up to my fence and stands at my fence, my dogs are gonna bark, probably.
That would be a mitigating circumstance, and all
But
that's
if we're
wrong.
going off their body camera, so like, because I literally can be in my backyard and hear dogs barking all over the neighborhood and none of them are mine. But the problem is, if you're coming to investigate, chances my dogs are gonna bark. And actually, they won't even tell me when UPS comes, so they're really worthless. But for some people, like we have some people down the street with us that have Dobermans, and what's a Doberman's job to do? Bark when somebody walks down the street. Well, they don't bark nonstop, but they bark when you walk down the street. So if animal control or if a police officer comes out, he walks down, what are those dogs gonna do? They're gonna bark. But they don't bark nonstop.
The people that are being affected will contact, and then they will tell us, they'll give me, I want a history. And then I send it over to Mo Mitchell, and then, but if they're trying to sleep at night and your dog's out barking at the leaves, then that's a problem, and that's gotta be, their peace and tranquility can't be affected by dogs barking at night at nothing.
Right, but the way that the evidence would be collected by using an officer's body camera would be inherently likely to cause a dog bark. So, so whether or not So if you've got the allegation that somebody's dog is barking nonstop, allegation is false, officer goes to see if the person's dog is barking. Because of the officer being present and approaching the house, the dog starts barking. So when the officer gets up to the door or up to the fence, the dog is barking and it appears that the allegation is true. Does that make sense?
Yes, but the CP officer, he or she has a chance or choice to alternate their shift a little bit. And if it's happening at 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning, 12 at night when you're trying to sleep and it's messing with your kids' sleep and stuff, it just can't happen. It doesn't matter if the officer goes up and starts barking. We have record that this has been going on. So then it just makes it easy for him to say, him or her to say, yes, we got to follow. Would you agree with that, Captain Pinkston?
I think you have a question.
Richard has a
I
question.
have a question. I'd like to know, first of all, how these are investigated now.
Well, it's very simple. You know, the officers will go out, typically the animal control officers will go out. We ask them to sit in their vehicles and listen for a while first before they go out and make contact. We're not trying to trigger the animal. If I wore my body camera and I walk up and I started shaking on the fence and kicking the fence, the dog's going to be triggered. We're not doing that. The cases that George is bringing to us are the more extreme cases, the ones where we haven't been able to get satisfaction with just neighbors talking to neighbors, or the officers talking to the neighbors, the animal control officers talking to neighbors. So these would be the ones where George walks in and says, hey, I've got a list, there's 10 different dates and times and locations. These people have a newborn baby. It's always occurring at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's every Tuesday and Thursday. We'll verify if that information is accurate. We'll have somebody there. If that information is accurate, if the officer shows up the first night at 2 o'clock in the morning, he's sitting in his car, all of a sudden the dog just starts wailing for whatever reason, that's going to give a lot of validity to this person's claim. Okay, we're not trying to have officers go out to trigger, and we're not going to send officers out there to say, someone made a complaint, therefore they're right, you're wrong, you have to do something. We will do an investigation.
So the second question is this been spoken about with the prosecutors? Are they in on this? Because what I've understood is that one of the reasons why these problems aren't handled, and I've heard some references to a situation that was specific to Grandview Heights, is that this guy was collecting all kinds of evidence, and what he was told is that just keep collecting the evidence because they go in front of the judge and it gets tossed out, and it puts an incredible burden on working people in Wichita to try to collect this. I mean, you gotta be, he had motion sensor cameras and all, this guy went above and beyond. I'd love to have him as my next door neighbor, because he went above and beyond trying to gather this information and prove his case with a young baby who was being woke up every single time the family went to sleep as the child was being awakened, which is going to contribute to developmental problems down the road eventually. So, and he couldn't do anything. And so I just want to be sure that if we do this, that we're not making an empty promise, that we bring these body cam stuff and this other evidence that I mentioned still have to be collected to the prosecutor, and then he just throws it out.
Well, keep in mind, we're talking about the end of the road when we're talking about prosecution, okay? I've been in law enforcement for 32 and a half years. We used to call it diffusing the situation. Today, the buzzword is de-escalating, so everybody thinks it's brand spanking new, it's not, okay? We're gonna de-escalate the situation. We're gonna try to mitigate the situation. We're gonna ask neighbors, listen, you need to understand, because sometimes neighbors, talking to neighbors doesn't work. But when we come out there and say, hey, you know, it's kind of getting serious, let's please work to resolve this. The majority of these complaints are resolved that way, the overwhelming majority. The one you're describing to me, frankly, I need to talk to you afterwards, because that one sounds like the ball was dropped or something happened that shouldn't have happened. Now, I will tell you this. I have testified in court for something that I, as an officer, witnessed this person do, and this person said, nuh-uh, and the judge says, I side with that person. So the judges do what the judges do. That's their role in the society that we have. That's their responsibility in the society that we have, and those things are going to happen. But the way you're kind of describing that seems like an extreme example that probably should not have happened.
After Captain Pinkston and I talked about this, I talked with City Legal, attorney was in the city, and they said that they would pass that on to the prosecutor, so they should be aware of it.
So I think it's important that we understand that it's not just the body camera, that the onus is still gonna be on the citizen to record this. And if it's a problem, you know, for them to go through all this trouble of recording it, you know it's a serious problem. It's really affecting their ability to have peace on their property. Right?
We had a dog that lived catty corner behind us, and I love dogs, and the poor dang thing sat in a dog kennel farthest from their house. And that poor dog was so bored and lonely, it learned the frequency that it could bark on a bark collar and not get shot. And that dog literally barked every 3 minutes all day long, because that's how the poor dog could bark and get around the bark collar. So I know I have dogs, and I do not like dogs that bark. So
I understand, and I'm just thinking this from a logistical standpoint, knowing how Wichita Police Department is extremely overwhelmed at this point.
yeah.
And although I think that this is an important topic, I really do. But when my business alarm goes off for 47 minutes and someone's trying to get to my business, I hate to break it to you, but a barking dog seems to be a little insignificant to some of the other issues that WPD has going on. I'm not saying it's not important. I 100% do, because I assure you, if my neighbor's dog was barking 24/7, I would be upset too.
But this is a CP officer going there, and his
I
normal-
understand, but right
he
now,
wouldn't be
CP
answering
officers,
911
hold on. Right now, CP officers are on the street assisting.
Well, also though, this isn't, I think you're thinking of a kind of thing where it's a nuisance complaint of like a level 1.
This is a level
The
5.
stuff that I'm talking, that I think we're dealing with getting to this point is, this is a very, this guy I think actually moved because of this problem. And I've heard of other people having to move. These are good neighbors, homeowners that we want to keep in our neighborhoods. And they're moving because the problem isn't addressed. And the police went out and talked to her. The police went out to talk to her. One time they knocked on the door and they said, well, we could hear the dog barking, but we couldn't see it, so there's nothing I can do, which seemed kind of crazy. And then she quieted down for a little while, and then it started up again. And then this guy's been, Facebooking me and saying, hey, these are the kind of problems we talked about, not like, I can't work this dog.
No, I get, trust me, I get it. If a dog was constantly barking next to me, I would not be happy either, believe me. And as a person who moves houses along, I don't want to have to sell that house for somebody and then the new person call me and say, you sold me a house next to a home that this dog barks constantly. Like, I would be upset, visibly upset, I'm sure. I just think that we have a lot on our plate, and I think that this probably, if it's an issue of something of that magnitude, I think that we need to trust WPD to take care of this issue without necessarily a gold standard program, to know that this is protocol anyway, that if they're getting a call, and maybe they did, I don't know what the situation is there, but they're trying to rectify the situation, and like he said, we're using de-escalation. If they're going to talk to the person and it keeps happening, then it becomes a little bit more forceful, am I correct? With that owner.
Well, and that's where this body cam, this new treatment of the body cam material would help in, bam, now it's resolved, because now they have an authoritative source of judgment in the field.
And my big concern was like you said, if you come walk up to the door, granted my dogs won't, but dogs' natural thing is to bark. But if we know that we have a protocol where we have those time frames, and we have a community officer who's in the neighborhood anyway, and kind of just like checking on you when you're out of town, they swing by your house, that they have that ability that they can go by the neighborhood and show that. I just,
And if
like they're
they're
sitting in their car and they're in the bark. Granted, some dogs will bark in cars too.
May I interject for a moment, please? There's a comment from Beauties and the Beast.
I was gonna say, can we add this?
Yes. Can citizens do the same thing for the anti-tether law to prove that a dog remains on a chain for longer than an hour for animal control to be able to enforce the law?
The answer is yes. Any evidence that they want to provide, particularly where they're not interfering. I don't want to get someone hurt here, but any evidence they provide to us, we will gladly take into consideration, and something like that would clearly help us.
What about
like
we can't
for
have a
food
police
and
officer sit out there for a solid hour?
The citizen would provide provide that. I guess there would be a timestamped video, is that the idea, that would run for over an hour?
What's real easy is what they do. The CT officer rides by, let's say at noon, he sees the dog tethered, comes back at 15 after 1. Well, there's a 1 hour time limit. If it's still tethered,
How do
it's
you
already
know
a
though
violation.
that they didn't like bring the dog in for a little bit and then bring him back out?
You can't do it per the ordinance. That's why we have the ordinance like it is. You can't do that. That hour started when that officer went by there. So if you brought it in, you can't break it up. You can do it 3 times a day, but you gotta have a 3-hour break in between. So
But then
that's why.
but their information isn't correct then, if they brought the dog in for a while and then put it back outside.
No, there's a limit. If you bring the dog in, the dog's gotta be in for 3 hours before it can
Gotcha.
be retethered.
Okay,
Yeah, but
so they
it's-
break
but
that out.
Yeah.
But just being devil's advocate, because someone would say this, I'm house training my dog, I put it out on the hour, every hour for 10 minutes to go potty.
And you know what my response is? Then you stand out there with that dog for 10 minutes.
And I'm just telling you, that's just your devil's advocate, and
I think we're wasting time on this issue. It's a pilot program. The captain's agreed to it. Let's see how it runs. If it works out, great, great. We all know it's a difficult issue. In a lot of cases, it's impossible. Let's let the professionals do what they can do and see how it works.
I'd like to add the tethering and the water and shelter to this as well.
Yeah, one of those cruelty-based
Yeah.
issues, so you can do it.
I'll make a motion, since I added that stuff. I make a motion that we approve the gold pilot program with the additions to other cruelty items added to, not extended to water, shelter, and tethering.
I would second that.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Thank you, George, for your presentation and your hard work on all of that. Okay, so now to old business. I'm going to turn this over to animal control.
Well, yeah, first thing I want to do is to apologize to the board for the volume of emails that each of you received, especially not knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
We had, this was a tabled issue from the January meeting. We're simply going to give an update. Most of you are probably quite aware that over the last 6 months, Wichita Police Department's been in the same boat society has. We've been dealing with the virus issue. We've been dealing with nationwide protests. We just frankly been a little bit too busy to do anything on PDD. That was my intent, was to come here and tell you. We haven't forgotten about it. We're not trying to hide it. We're not trying to do anything behind the scenes. We haven't done anything on it. We've been busy. We had an incident a couple of weeks ago with one of the rescues where one of their dogs had bit one of the volunteers. Frankly, it's the most horrific bite that I have seen. I'm not the most experienced guy, but it was a horrific enough bite that caused me to be a little bit queasy. I'm not usually a queasy guy. I've seen an awful lot of things in my career, but kind of bothered me. You know, we were going to sit down and discuss this with them. We haven't had time. Somehow I believe that they misconstrued that this agenda item was specifically about them, and then we were going to implement changes. That was never the intent of it. It was a tabled motion. We had every intent of coming here just to update the board that it's not a forgotten item, it's just something we haven't done anything on. So they sent social media posts out. All those people on the social media side started emailing all of you, of course, the mayor, the council, the chief, me, Lieutenant Hungria, the manager, you know, pretty much everybody that they could. So I apologize for that. I responded to as many of them as I could with the simple facts that there's no truth to the allegations on social media. Frankly, I'm disappointed that the false information went out like it did. A simple, you know, phone call to me, I think could have corrected it had they done it on the front end, but they chose not to. So that's our update on PDE. There is no change. There's been nothing addressed at this particular point.
So are the rescues still able to pull PDDs?
Have been the whole time.
Okay. And the animal that was involved in that accident, was that a PDD dog?
When you say accident, you mean incident? Because
Yeah.
okay.
Was that a PDD dog?
That dog was, I don't believe, was actually deemed a PDD. We thought it was when it initially happened because we knew we had prior bite with that dog.
Okay.
But I don't believe that Lieutenant Sabina ever got around to deeming it a PDD.
Okay. As we move forward, and I have in the past couple of days since all of this has started, and I am a huge advocate of communication, and that comes from my history of having done kind of social work, case management, and some investigations on abuse and stuff like that. So looking at the ordinance and at the definitions, there is quite a bit that is subjective. And so it would be wonderful to either, I hesitate to say come up with a committee, but I think one of the things that we need to look at is either consulting with an animal behaviorist or consulting with some of the rescue groups who, and KHS might have some of the skilled people who can help with assessing, but come up with like a flow chart for assessing. Or 20 years ago when I was a CPS investigator, we had risk assessments that we would use, and they would kind of guide decision making about whether or not a family was safe, and then kind of what to do in various situations. So to have something more clearly spelled out, like the use of force guidelines, for example, might help, number one, with these determinations, and just, kind of try to eliminate as much ambiguity as possible. But number two, with the rescues, and then if a dog needs to be held, it would help everybody understand why. So that way, if there comes a situation where it's not an animal that should be released to a rescue, everybody's kind of on the same page. And so I guess that's one reason why, in talking with some of the rescue people, it sounds like they really don't want animals that are a danger either. And it sounds like, so in that sense, it sounds like the police department and the rescues agree. And so to find some way to, like I said, create a flow chart or something, and probably a consultant who specializes in animal behavior, some of the people who do canine behavior assessments here in town. Anyway, just thoughts in looking at this, thoughts in having made determinations about danger in the past. So,
just so you know, we kind of need discretion built into the law. And the
yes.
purpose of that is, if I pull over, someone who's doing 30 miles an hour speed limit, and I get up to the car and they say my child's having a heart attack, my child's choking, I'm trying to get to the hospital, the person doesn't need a ticket. If I have no discretion, I have to give that person a ticket.
Yeah, there does need to be discretion, but at the same time, if we wind up, or the police department winds up at any point making changes to interaction between PD to dogs and rescues, some of the ambiguity needs to be resolved. And like I said, I understand, I was a CPS investigator, so I understand the immediacy, the need for discretion, at the same time the need for guidance.
Well, just so you know, I had Lieutenant Hungria and staff pull the statistics for 2019. That's when this issue came to a head, okay? We had 168 dogs deemed potentially dangerous in 2019. 168. 153 were reclaimed by the owners. So we're talking about 15 dogs. 12 of those dogs were adopted by rescues. 3 were euthanized. So we're talking about 12 dogs, 1 a month. That's what we're talking about here. Just creating all of this consternation. And I think that we're okay in trying to work with the rescues. I'm going to be honest with you, my experience with rescues is they don't always want to work with us. Okay? They have a different goal in mind. They don't like euthanasia. We don't like euthanasia. We love the fact that they come in and help us. We love the fact that they make us look good by the amount of dogs that they rescue. But we're talking about 12 dogs here. And that's where all this consternation has come from, is 12 dogs. I think the system's working pretty good, to be frank with you. I don't think it's perfect. I think it's working great. If you could come up with a flow chart, I'd sure love to see it. There's probably stuff out there. There's so much research and information in the animal rescue world that there possibly is. I haven't seen it. So I would love to see
I'll
that.
start doing some research.
Perfect.
But one thing I did notice in talking with, some of the groups, and then with one of the constituents from my district who is familiar with the county's animal control process, is that there are far more commonalities on values between, it seems like there's kind of a, we hear tribalism a lot, and it seems like that communication is starting to trend that way between the rescues and the police department.
Sure.
Where in actuality, there's far more common ground. And like you said, the police department really appreciates the rescues in how they help adopt and keep the euthanasia rates way down.
Yes.
And the rescues appreciate being able to help the animals. And so maybe at some point, one of the things we could talk about is communication and with the different parties, just to.
Real quick, if I could interject, Beauty and the Beast says that they've rescues have pulled at least 30 potentially dangerous dogs over the last year, from 2019 to present. Is that correct?
Well, I know what the numbers are for 2019. I haven't asked for the first half of this year.
Okay, so Teresa had her hand up for a while.
So, I like that because one of the things is that it's ambiguous. Number one, not every dog that bites, scratches, attacked is even deemed. Because I know they talked last time about some couple of really bad situations that were significant bites. But the dogs were on their own property and the people were doing something stupid, okay? So that's one thing. It's so hard to get that, and there's so many trainers out there that call themselves behaviorists that they read some books. There is one board-certified behaviorist in the state of Kansas, and he's in Kansas City. There used to be two, Dr. Emily Weiss. Dr. Emily Weiss is the one that was big in developing the system that they use to judge their dogs and whether or not they consider that dog dangerous. Now, I'm not saying that maybe that excludes some dogs that potentially would be wonderful pets, but I will also tell you, I see some dogs that come from rescue that are literally not adoptable, that live their lives in a cage, and I don't know that that's a benefit for the dog. Some that we have to sedate completely and totally to draw blood. Now, do I see pet dogs that are that way too? Oh yeah, I do. I see them that we gotta knock them out to turn their toenails because it's less stressful. So it's really tough when you get that to that situation. But when these people are talking about hundreds of dogs, 56% of the people reclaim their dangerous dogs. That takes some major commitment. That's not just a sign in a microchip. So if 56 of the people, I kind of wondered about the potentially dangerous, but when we're not talking about hundreds of dogs, and if we're talking about one child's face or one little old lady's dog being mauled to death in front of them, but it actually survived long enough for them to have a $5,000 to $6,000 veterinary bill before it died. Unfortunately, not having that happen, and it could still happen, but it's a bad situation. But I do think that finding a flow chart would be good, but it's all gray. None of this is black and white.
Stephanie?
So back in October of 2019, when this started originally, this board voted 5-0 to leave this in Wichita Police Department's purview because, like you said, it is very gray. And we are all not a party to everything that happens on personal property, private property, whatever it may be, or in public. And that's what they're trained to do. I mean, they have to make that determination because ultimately, in the event that that dog leaves the facility and hurts somebody or hurts another animal or hurts life, they're the ones that have to speak up for it, not us sitting around this table. And although I don't like animals being euthanized for no reason or whatever, I think that if they're telling us that there's a reason that this animal hurt somebody, attacked somebody, and can be dangerous later on, I think that that's their job. I mean, I've seen these animals. I mean, we work in rescue every day, and some of these animals, I'll be honest with you, should never leave a shelter environment and go back out into the public. it's unfortunate because humanity has failed these animals. The animal didn't fail themselves, humanity did in the end. And I think that, you know, whenever we talked about this back in October, you know, we realized that there's a lot of gray area. They're interviewing the owner, the person that was attacked, or that, you know, whoever, whatever happened, and they are looking into that more subjectively than we ever could. And I do agree, you know, none of us sitting at this table are behavioralists. Nobody in this room is a behavioralist. We can't predict the future. We don't have a crystal ball. But I think that there's a reason why we did that back then. It's because they needed to have, yes, they have some guidelines, but it's always going to be gray, even with the flow chart, which I think would be good to have so people can understand it better. But there's always going to be gray. It's not going to be black and white, no matter what we do.
Well, we also left it with animal control under it being a public safety issue, which is why everybody on the board said this needs to stay with PD. Now, it's come up again in January. The motion was, there wasn't a motion, it was a discussion that was tabled for more information. So there are some comments on here. The first one is, let's see here.
Can I just finish on it before we go to the public? I just wanted to add something on this too, that I think the police department is doing a really good job with these persons. When I look at the euthanasia rates of 11%, okay, I look at the monthly rates. The majority of the months so far this year are below 10%. Best Friend Society and typically an animal welfare issue say no kill shelter is a shelter that has a euthanasia rate of 10%.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Adoptable animals. Most of them say adoptable animals too.
Okay. So I think they're doing good. Now, if there's something that we can do to assist in making these determinations clearer, there's always going to be they're going to have to make a judgment, a flow chart. I think that's a good idea. I personally think that the data that comes out, there's a lot of misinformation, misinterpretation, and misunderstanding even on this board of what exactly we're looking at. Maybe we need to come up with a way of continue to give us this raw data and find a way of presenting it in such a way that it's more consumable by folks out in the field. It would be nice to get the data from the rescues, a little more detailed data from the rescues on what they're pulling and able to rehome and whatnot, to incorporate into a picture of what is that no-kill shelter looking like, right? I hear that all the time in the community. We want a no-kill shelter, we want a no-kill shelter. So I think the guidance could be clearer and the data could be clearer. And maybe that does merit a committee or a subcommittee to look at this and bringing that about. To make improvement, we all want to improve. Man, if we can save one dog, save one child, that's awesome. I think we should always be striving for that, right?
Of course.
So maybe if I can stew a little bit with the other members.
Now, I do know, in speaking with Captain earlier, they are revising how they're doing some stuff, like their spreadsheets, you've got Dr. I'm sorry. Lieutenant.
Congratulations on your PhD.
Sorry, I work in the medical field, so I get, yeah. So, Lieutenant is new, so there's a lot of room for improvement. So I think we kind of need to just give them a little bit of time to iron out some wrinkles. They're having to work with spreadsheets that weren't theirs originally. So I don't think it's a bad idea about a subcommittee, but I do think that giving them a little bit of time to kind of even out and getting a rhythm together is really important. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
Well, if there's not a change right now, we can just kind of start researching and, welcome input from anybody who has advice, who has thoughts. You've got my email, use it. And then, we can go through and try to work with what we can find, and this doesn't need to, sounds like it doesn't need action today.
Right.
So,
Correct.
Okay, so some comments being made here. Let's see. Susie Cunningham states, well, hold on, let me go back to work. She says, yes, Elaine, you're on target. How much data can be stored on a microchip by companies? Can the history of the dogs be accessible to the next owner? Does anybody know that?
All a microchip is a number.
Okay.
That's all that's held on it is a microchip is a number. Hopefully that number is registered to accurate information about the owner. It's also registered to the facility that implanted it. So the facility that implanted it should at least have the information from the person at the time that they got the microchip.
Okay.
So all it is a number. The city of Wichita, however, can track that number if there's multiple incidences. So they changed the Black Lab's name from Fred to Charlie. Go, oh no, this is Charlie, not Fred. Well, I don't know a Black Lab from one to the other. And that microchip is going to give you a number and say, no, that's Fred, not Charlie.
Okay.
So that's where the advantage for the city for that microchip is.
I think we had this discussion back when we were talking about microchipping cats and being able to keep their vaccination records looped in with their chip and how that wasn't a possibility.
Well, if they're a community cat and they're registered with their community with that microchip, then the community should have records. Also,
But the data's not on the chip.
Yeah, it's not on the chip.
Right, that's what I was getting at. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Okay. Second line on old business. Board members, you guys have the opportunity to report any activities or events concerning, that are concerning your neighborhoods. Anybody have anything they need to share? Want to bring up to the board?
I did have somebody bring up a concern. It's not a concern for the average pet owner. The average pet owner spays and neuters their pets. 90% of pet dogs and 80% of pet dogs are spayed and neutered. However, people that show dogs, they have to be intact. And for performance dogs, sometimes we like to spay and neuter them later in life. A friend of mine shows dogs. She has female dogs. Believe it or not, if you have only one sex, it's a lot less likely for them to have an oops and reproduce. In the city of Wichita, it is against the law to own 2 female intact dogs unless you get unless you get a breeder's license. However, you cannot get a breeder's license in a residential neighborhood. So those of us that had sex ed in 5th and 6th grade know 2 girls can't reproduce. So it would be nice if we could either remove that requiring 2 intact female dogs requiring a breeder's license, or look at amending that somebody in a residential neighborhood can get a breeder's license. She had no problems getting a breeder's license, which is $100 a year in addition to paying $48 a year for an intact dog, but she couldn't get one because she lives in a house. So basically it has become illegal to own 2 intact female dogs, which the average pet owner is not going to do anyway. Where they need to live in an industrial area.
But you're referring to an ordinance change.
Right, it's something to consider. And to me, probably, I think it would be something that should be brought forth with some discussion. I don't think that the problem with everybody requiring spay-neuter and everybody requiring making it illegal to breed, then the only place for people to get purebred puppies from is a commercial kennel. So, as a matter of fact, there was just an incident where they had, in California, I think, 50 out of 300 dogs shipped over from Russia for the pet industry died on the plane because we can't get purebred dogs in our country, so we're importing them from Eastern Russia.
So why haven't these people petitioned their councilman or councilwoman?
They're just going to move out of town because that's the only answer. So, and probably because they don't know. It was just brought to me that I have an intact male and I have an intact female, and hopefully I will not have Borzoi Chinese custom mixes. So it just one of those things that was brought up to me by somebody.
So by trying to change the breeder's license ordinance, wouldn't that kind of open another big problem within our city?
Why would it open?
Well, I
another big
mean,
problem?
wouldn't you have an excessive amount of like breeders out there? I mean, is that the whole reason why they put that ordinance in place?
Actually, if you talk to Drew and them, they never had a problem with puppies. And I will tell you, when I was at the Kansas Humane Society as an employee, we would have 4 to 5 litters of puppies in quarantine every single week,
Oh, okay.
nonstop. How many puppies do you see now? Litters of puppies.
I wish I could tell you an exact number. I mean, it's over 2,000 puppies that we come to. Last year, it was ridiculous. Now, this year it's not bad, but last year was horrible.
And how many are purebred dogs that have been health
I
tested?
mean, it's none that I'm aware of, unless they bring the certificate in, we don't know that it's a purebred animal.
Yeah. So if you don't have, if they have to get a breeder's license, most people aren't gonna do it. So there's, I mean, I look on the Wichita Animal Shelter site and they very rarely do I see puppies. So pit bulls and chihuahuas.
Don't you be picking on my dog. I'm
Right.
smiling.
He's looking at you. He's
But-
like, what?
What did you just say?
But anybody that wants a well-bred, purebred dog that has been raised properly and is social and had health tested parents have to go out of the city. And most of the time, they get duped, like my dad did, got duped into buying a commercial kennel dog that they have 7 bitches and 2 dogs, and they drove to Illinois to get them. So if we want to encourage internet dogs and those type of things, that's fine. There are very specific requirements to get a breeder's license. And I just think that it should drop the residential, and I don't think, that they can be in a residential neighborhood. And I think that, considering somebody a breeder because they have 2 intact female dogs is just, anybody that had sex ed should realize that that's not possible.
Can I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
If the city gives them a breeder's license, does that then open them up and require them to get a state or a federal license as well?
That means you don't have to get a state or federal license unless you're having a significant number. So like, I have a stud dog, and I have been told I do not need a breeder's license for a stud dog. I have been in purebred dogs for 21 years. I've shipped semen to Europe twice. I can breed 4 litters. Just because you have a breeder's license doesn't mean you're going to be having 10 litters a year. You might have one every 3 to 5 years.
There are state requirements for a recreational breeder and a breeder that they have to go through certain inspections.
So if you're
You have
selling
over
to a
certain
pet
level.
store, then you have to have the license, right?
Yes,
Right.
and you have to go through inspections on a yearly
Right.
basis. Yes.
Right.
But a hobby breeder, is that what they're called?
Yes.
They don't have to toe the line with the feds?
Not from a federal standpoint, from a state standpoint, there are some state requirements for hobby breeders as well, but they're not as strict as a regular breeder's license.
And I know some people get around the USDA licensure by they deliver the puppies instead of sending them because you have to meet the owners. So, yeah.
They deliver them through the mail?
No,
No,
they
drive
get
them.
on a plane
Oh,
or
that's
drive them personally or fly them personally to there to not have a USDA license.
The lady from CAPS would be a good person to talk to about this.
Yeah, I'm not so much concerned about somebody that, has 2 females and lives in the city.
Yeah.
We are more concerned as a rescue perspective of the people that are breeding whatever just to put a sign up on a tree and sell them for $100. That's more of the concern, and not bloodline related. like, he's from Chicago, so I know his bloodline and things like that. But I think that what the city and what we would be as a community more concerned about is your breeders that they're not gonna get a license anyway, they're gonna do it until they get caught. You know, this is something that's very manageable.
And technically, if you just have a random dog and you have puppies and you give them away, you can do that all day long and it's legal because you're not selling them, so you don't have to have a breeder's license.
So online, Allison Crazy Adventures says, wouldn't it be easier to consider initiating a new type of license for show or performance dogs?
Like to have a new category.
Well, not necessarily, because people with pit bulls can show their dogs too. So you just blown off your thing there. I would say, my thing to be is, it's ridiculous to say that because you have 2 intact female dogs, that obviously makes you a breeder. That's the big, so she cannot license her dogs in the city of Wichita because she has them intact, because she shows her dogs for performance. So she cannot legally comply with the law without moving. And she's not breeding them. So it seems like a kind of silly law to me.
I think that the thing that I'm concerned about too is the residential neighborhood. If I had people that were breeding dogs, that were breeding dogs with this availability in my neighborhood next to me, I'm not sure that I don't know where that could, I mean, what are the limits on litters per year? You have 2 dogs. Is there a limit on the number of litters? How many dogs are going to be next door? The noise, and things like that.
Well, couldn't the exception or whatever for the ordinance be stipulated to be intact dogs of the same sex? I mean, isn't that,
I think that's what she's saying.
No, you can have an intact dog and an intact bitch. They can have both. You can have an intact male dog and an intact female. That's perfectly legal. You can have 2 intact male dogs. It's perfectly legal. You cannot own 2 intact female dogs in the city of Wichita unless you get a breeder's license. But she was like, okay, I'll get a breeder's license. Well, you can't because you live in a residential neighborhood. So that was her issue, is she cannot legally have her dogs in the city of Wichita
So
because
she
they're
doesn't want to
intact.
breed them. She just wants
She
to
has no
have.
interest on
I
breeding, but
think
they
it's
have
a
to be
real
intact to show.
simple solution. Lobby the city council, I don't think they'd have a problem amending the ordinance without affecting anything else. I mean, obviously, they didn't think of that.
Yeah.
They can't anticipate every problem when they pass an ordinance. I don't know that this board's role would be to lobby the city. I mean, we could certainly agree with someone to help their cause along, but I don't know whether it's really within our purview to do anything about it, so.
Well, technically, we're an advisory board and we have no merit at all anyway.
Okay, well then make a motion and we make a suggestion to the city that they amend their ordinance.
Well, I was just bringing up the
It's
topic
just
that was presented.
This
to
part
me.
is an issues, updates of people that contact you and
It
what will
wasn't
happen.
started
when
off
you
doing
start
it.
contacting
It was
them.
I get it, so let's take care of it, if that's what you want to do. Nobody here has a problem with that. Seems pretty common sense approach to me.
Okay.
We can do that. Right?
I would move that we remove the requirement that two intact female dogs requires a breeder's license.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes, discussion.
Sorry.
That excludes the breed specific, right? That
Well,
would
pit bulls are against the law to have intact, period.
okay.
So it would be irrelevant. Matter of fact, you cannot get a breeder's license for a pit bull.
I'd like to make a motion actually to table this in order to do more research on it before we vote on something like this.
No, I agree. It was just something that I wanted to bring up because it was brought up to me.
Absolutely.
So I would second your amended motion.
And then this is also something, that we could put on the agenda for our next round, once we all have a little bit more homework put together. So the first motion on the floor was to remove, I'm sorry,
Two female intact
two female
dogs.
intact dogs from the ordinance. It was seconded. the amended motion is to table this until our next meeting, so we get more information at the second. So for the first motion,
We have to deal with the amended one first.
oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So all in favor of the amended motion of tabling this until our next meeting, raise your hand if you favor it. All opposed, raise your hand. Okay, so that motion passes. We will table this and approach it at our next meeting, so we all have time to kind of research it a little bit more. Thank you so much for bringing that to the board. It's important to hear the issues in our community. Does anybody else have anything to bring forth from your district? Public comment, George?
Richard's encroaching on that 6-foot rule with Rick.
I tried, George.
Jeepers, George. All right. Is there any comment out in the public before we adjourn? The only person, I see 2 people out here. Any comments that you want to add? No? Okay.
I just want to say one thing for whoever doesn't have a smartphone or a calendar. The next meeting is September 16th,
That's exciting.
November 18th, and January 20th. And since Mark raised it to 6:30, I think we're going to be staying here because the parking's good and the room's good, so.
Okay. So George, you beat me to my next thing
Oh.
I was going to say, but thank you very much. Our next meeting is going to be September 16th here at Humane Societies.
I'm sorry, but can somebody send me an email of those
Got
dates,
it.
please, just so I can
Yes.
reserve the room for you?
Of course, we
Okay,
can get that
thank you.
taken care of for you. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I would say we adjourn.
Second.
All right, so it's been moved. The second we adjourn. All in favor? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And thank you for the new membership for coming and participating and